Hi, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything, where I talk about books that are old, strange, interesting, or just weird. And one thing I did recently, which I didn't think anyone would be interested in, was talk about one comic book, a completely, I wouldn't say random, but certainly a kind of low status comic book. It's not collectible, it's not something people talk about in any kind of classic terms. An issue of Superman Family from the 1970s, and I spent a week reading that in considerable detail, which was so much fun. I've now bought some more Superman Families
Hurrah!
because I just got interested in how this comic came about and how it ended up. So this was 1974. Uh, Rewound a bit to the first issue, which was number 164. What?
Mm.
Because it was Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, had a comic for a long, long time that got cancelled and turned into this. So did Lois Lane and so did Supergirl have comics, also cancelled and also turned into this thing. So it was sort of a roundup of, shall we say, not redundant exactly, sort of de-comicized characters.
De-interestingified.
Yeah, maybe. So giving them another chance. I was
That's a word.
keen to see, well, how do you launch a comic like that and make it sound awesome? So went back and got the first of that series, when in those days it was one of the 100-page super spectaculars. I love 100-page super spectaculars. So this is something DC did, where you'd get a comic which had a spine. It was that thick, 60 cents, quite expensive, and as it says, 100 pages, which tended to be new story at the front, reprints at the back, which is how this started off as well. So got this as the first one, so I'll get into that at some point. Just looking at the covers, one thing I love about the covers to these comics is this strip down the side that gives the roster of characters who are going to be in the comic. So you get this band, and for the first few, see if I can show them all at once. Um, yeah, to start with, it was the same pictures. So you've got Supergirl in this kind of, she's flying and she's kind of curving round in one go. You've got Jimmy Olsen standing proudly in a pair of flares, and you've got Lois Lane always at the bottom. So it's I now see Lois Lane standing the way she's standing in, I guess it's either hot pants or a mini skirt. Interesting thing, looking at them together, is although it's the same drawing, the colours of the clothes can vary. Not Supergirl, because that's her uniform, but Jimmy and Lois, it's the same drawing, exactly the same look, but the colours change. So this top of Lois's, for instance, it's yellow, it's white, it's orange. So that's kind of weird. Like it's a bit like the horse of a different colour in the Wizard of Oz movie. Maybe it died and they
Sent it to
they
a
they
farm.
skinned it and people could wear its color changing
Stop
horse
now
fur.
before you go too far.
uh,
Horse fur?
yes, horse fur. So the roster strips, but they didn't always stay like that. They, after a while, they began to vary them. So fast forwarding beyond the one I read before, it's now Superman Family, 5 stories all new. It's a $1. It's a dollar comic, which is a kind of another oversized comic. So by the 80s, you're now getting all new stories, which is sort of better. But you still got the strip down the side, but now it's different every time. So uh, I've got one where um, Lois is sitting at a gigantic computer, which is cool. So she's an early adopter of office computers. But I haven't got that comic. I've seen that picture. The ones I've actually bought, Supergirl flying around as normal. Here's Jimmy Olsen kneeling down with the camera, and not quite sure what Lois Lane's up to here. She could be running, she could be dancing, she could be stamping on something. Hard to tell, but she's in professional attire now, which is good. Um, I particularly like this one. So again, Supergirl flying. There's Jimmy Olsen. He seems to like green clothes quite a lot. Um, maybe just because it distinguishes him from everybody else, everyone who isn't wearing green clothes. There's Jimmy in action pose, and there is Lois Lane in a kind of odd, probably physically hard to do pose where one leg is thrusting. She's striding along with one leg dramatically to the fore. Now, this I believe to be an homage. Lois Lane here, she's doing, not doing the Werewolves of London. She's not doing the bull dagger swagger, although anything's possible. She is doing the keep on trucking walk.
Oh,
Keep on trucking was a drawing by underground cartoonist Robert Crumb, with a guy with that one leg thrust forward, an uncanny walk. And this, at the time, well, before this really, 70s, was a bit like a meme. It was everywhere. It was on posters, clothing, pin badges, iron-on patches, sew-on fabric patches, which I've actually seen advertised within the pages of these very comics. In this very comic, obviously that's a bit small, but in amongst this vast profusion of fabric iron-on patches is a keep on trucking image. So yes, there is Lois apparently doing that. Okay, it's a bit less exaggerated, but I'm claiming that as a thing. It's a crossover between mainstream comics and underground comics. Um, and finally, final roster strip, and I think this is probably takes the art form of the side strip to its ultimate. They seem to have actually come alive and become aware. So now Supergirl still flying, but this Supergirl flies into the action of the main bit of the cover and actually is in the story. So not content to be just a kind of emblem for like, here's the characters you're getting in this comic. She's now flying in doing that. Jimmy and Lois, the two journalists, are now playfully photographing each other. They've taken their cameras and they're photographing each other, which is really cool. And again, fashion followers of Lois Lane. I think we've got sort of mid-length culottes and a yellow top and a yellow beret. So yeah, looking forward to these. The covers promise the vast array of stories you're going to get inside. I will not exclusively work on these. I will, when I fancy it, dip into them, but I'll go through them sequentially. If anyone wants to play along at home, then you don't have to wait for me. You can make a start if you wish with Superman Family 164, 100 page, super spectacular. This is Jimmy Olsen Presents, So they had this thing of the lead character, the lead story revolving around. So the one who gets the new story was alternating at the time. And I've had a little peek. One thing I like is this idea of presenting the comic. It's actually happening with little panels at the top of all of the stories, the new one and the reprints, with Jimmy Olsen presenting them to us. So there's something to look forward to in these otherwise grim times. Superman Family will pop up from time to time. I'll be back soon with something else. Goodbye.